welcome to Stalking the Wild Autoharp. Today I'm excited because I'm beginning a new series on the Prizim style of autoharp. The Prizim is an autoharp that requires that you push two buttons at once to get the simple chords that you get with one button on any other autoharp. And it's got all of those, but it's also got many other kinds of chords like major sevenths, minor sevenths, sus4s, add nines, ninths, minor sixths, major sevenths, did I mention that? And it plays open chording style, diatonic style in 5 keys. So it's quite a versatile system, and the beauty of the system is it's the same in every key. And for the majors, that arrangement is the Brian Bowers arrangement, which many of us already know and love and use all the time, every day. So it's pretty easy to move over to a Prizim if you already play in the Brian Bowers setup. And what I wanted to cover today, real briefly, before I go into depth about the different playing techniques and styles and kinds of chords that are on a Prizim, I wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about how to convert your 21 chord chromatic autoharp into a Prizim, because you can do it in about an hour. And you start with your existing chord bars. Okay, so I'm going to tell you basically how to do that. Now, this is not a video on how to cut felt, but that's all that's involved. It's a matter of putting more notches into each of your chord bars. Okay, so if you have never cut felt, there are, excuse me, I'm reaching for something here. If you've never cut felts before, there are other videos online that show you how to do that. I don't have one yet in my Stalking the Wild Autoharp series, but those can be found online on how to cut your felts. But in this case, you're starting with felts that are already cut into your majors, minors, and 7th chords. And then you're going to cut out additional notes from each kind of chord. The Prizim doesn't have majors, minors, and 7ths. You get those by combining buttons, okay? And we'll get into that technique in, a few weeks on this series. But right now I want to talk about the setup, okay? There are 3 rows of chord bar buttons on any given autoharp, and one is what we call the treble row, because it's on the side of the little shorty strings, the treble strings. One is called the middle row, and it runs right down the middle of the autoharp. And the last row is called the bass row, because it's on the same side of the harp as the bass strings. Okay, now assuming you are a right-handed player, I'm a lefty but I play righty, so assuming you are a left-handed player, your hand is going to wrap around the treble side of the instrument, and these buttons that are closest to you are on a Brian Bowers setup, they are 7ths. Well, on the Prizim they are 9ths. So all that's involved is cutting out another note from each chord bar, okay, or that same note in its different octaves. For example, right next to the C major is a C9. It was a C7, but then I took it off and I cut out the 2nd scale degree up from the root. For example, a C7 is C, E, G, B flat. But to make it a C9, I have to cut out the D's. D is one whole step up from C. So now I have a chord bar that is C, D, E, G, B flat. And so on around the circle of fifths. Okay, now if you don't know what the circle of fifths is, I have another video on the circle of fifths, but it's the arrangement that the autoharp typically follows through. We go F, C, G, D, A, E, etc. going down. Okay, now that's what happens to all the seventh chords. They all get the second scale degree cut out to turn them into a ninth chord. Now, what happens with the majors? Normally, in a Brian Bowers arrangement harp, the middle row is a major chord. C major, G major, D major, etc. Again, circle of fifths. And the major is right next to the seventh. For example, C7, C major. Well, on the prism, we go C9 and then C major scale. It's not a C major chord anymore, it's a scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do in C. However, on the prism, the second scale degree, re, do, re, mi, is not there. So instead we have do, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Key of C, for example, C, E, F, G, A, B, C, on up. You skip the second scale degree, just like you added it on the ninth. And that's the secret of combining the chords, because when you play the major scale and the ninth chord together, you get a simple chord. And because they're right here together, they can be played with one finger, which means your 1, 4, and 5 chord are right under your same fingers as you're used to having them with the Brian Bowers. You just have to flatten your hand out and bridge across the two buttons. Okay, so that takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's the same pattern for playing your melodies. Okay, so in the middle we have these major scales, and what they are in effect is a lock bar that takes your chromatic autoharp. The prism is a chromatic. It takes your chromatic scale and it locks it down to a major scale. And you've got 7 of those, okay, which allows you to play major scales in 5 keys. All right? Now, if you don't quite see the value of that, here's the point. It allows you to open chord. Diatonic players, take note. You can open chord on a chromatic autoharp. Why would you want to do that? Well, number one, you got 5 keys instead of 2 or 1. Okay? Number 2, you can jump outside your key that you're, say you're playing a diatonic, and all of a sudden you've got a chord that's way outside the key. You can't do it. An open chord on a chromatic, you can play it, but you can't do your open chording technique. On the prism, you can. All right? So it allows you to open chord in 5 keys. All right? Now, let's move on to the minor key row. Okay? The minors normally are straight minors, and they are normally the relative minor in the same row. In other words, if I'm playing C major and I reach out and grab the button right above it, in the minor row, I'm going to have the 6th above that chord, which is, or 3 down from that chord, which is called the relative minor. Okay? For example, on the key of C, I reach out and I've got an A minor. All right? This is a little bit different on the prism. On the prism, when you reach out like that and you play the minor that's right there, you get the 3, the minor third. And the 6th is above your 4 chord. All right? For example, key of C, in order to play A minor, you're going to reach out with your F finger. Okay? And you'll find A minor there. Everything is shifted up 1 button. All right? And there's a reason for that that I'll get into in a minute. See if I can remember to come back around to it. Okay, but here's how you cut the felts. All right, you take your minor. First of all, you're going to turn it into a minor seventh. Okay, to do that, you take your root and figure out what note is one whole step below the root. For example, A minor, to make it A minor 7, you're going to cut out a G all the way up and down. Okay, all the G's on that bar are going to get cut out. Okay, now it's a minor 7th. Then you have to cut out one more note, which is one half step below that minor 7th note. For example, key of A minor, you've cut out the G's, now cut out an F sharp, which is a half step below the G. What that does is it turns that minor chord into a minor 6/7. Minor 7th with a major 6th. Okay? Now that seems like it wouldn't be a very useful chord by itself. And by itself, maybe it's not. But it allows you to combine that button with other buttons and create other kinds of nifty chords. All right? And also, when I'm open chording, I can open chord in a minor scale on that button, and it works pretty well, is what I've discovered. All right? So you've got a circle of fifths here in your minors, and they are all minor 6/7s. Again, if you replay this tape while you calculate what that's going to be for all of your minor chords, and then just follow the circle of fifths around, you'll have it. Okay? Everything gets shifted up one button again so that the relative minor for your key sits above the 4 chord. In other words, it's going to be above the, in key of C, you're going to find A minor above the F, not above the C. Okay, so everything's shifted, and what I've done on my one button at a time harps, my diatonic, my chromatic, is I shift all my minors. So I get used to them being there, and it conforms to my prism, and so they all have the same pattern. Okay, maybe you don't want to do that, that's fine. What I discovered is after I started playing this instrument, I put away my diatonic, I put away my chromatic, because this does all that. Is it as full sounding? That's debatable. I think it is, because all these chords with added notes and the open chording open up strings, and it gives it a nice full fat sound, and there's less dead strings that are being scratchy. All right. Furthermore, I've changed my bass strings. That's something else we'll cover in another video. I've changed my bass strings to give me more beefy bass, which gives, again, the Autoharp a nice full sound. This Autoharp is as loud as my diatonic. It really is. And it's full sound in a slightly different way. So that's a little primer on how to cut the felts for a prism. So if you have a chromatic that's sitting around languishing, I recommend that you try this. It's got to be in the Brian Bowers arrangement. So if you don't know what that is, you can Google that and find out how that's set up. But maybe you already use the Brian Bowers. A lot of people do. And so once you start there, you're going to cut out the additional notches from each felt, and within about an hour, you'll have a prism. One last thing to remember, and I'm glad that I thought of this. When you cut out your felts, when cutting felts, we do what we call voicing. And voicing means you try to leave the root or the fifth of the chord in the bass at all times. On the prism, you don't want to do that, because on the prism, a given chord is not responsible just for making that chord. It's also responsible for combining with other bars, and you want those notes to be there that may not be immediately evident as you're cutting the bars. So go ahead and cut the notes all the way to the bottom. Don't be afraid to leave a third in the bass, for example, or even a seventh in the bass. Just go ahead and cut it all the way to the bottom, and then save your little triangles that you cut out of your felts, because if you find that you don't like the way a chord is voiced, you can always glue a triangle back in and take that note out. Okay, but I cut them all the way to the base, and I seldom find that I need to restore a slot that I've already cut out. Just go slow, be careful, make sure that you've figured out your chord correctly, and there you go. That's how you create a prism. Over the next few weeks, we'll talk about the special chords and special fingering techniques. Learning to play a prism is a left-handed thing. You're focusing more on left-handed techniques than right-handed techniques. Once you get your right-hand techniques from your regular auto harp, they cross over. But the prism is all about doing things with your left hand, knowing how to add notes to chords, and you can do all of that. There is another video already in this series, the very first one I made, as a matter of fact, that's called A New Setup. And it's all about the prism, and it's like 23 minutes long, and it talks about the special chords and all kinds of things. And the rest of this series is going to go into more detail about the prism, sort of close up on the prism for those of you who are interested. In the meantime, I'm Hal Weeks, and I teach online through Skype, private lessons. They're very cost effective because neither one of us has to go anywhere. We just meet weekly over the internet through Skype. So check that out if you're interested in lessons with me. And my website is in the notes below. It's halweeks.com. That's how you connect with me for lessons. And remember to subscribe to the series so that you get them all. Thanks again. I'm Hal Weeks. You guys have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.